Hello and welcome to Temple of Akasha, the home of embodied spirituality with me, Natasha. So before we dive into today's video, I would like to start with an announcement. On November 3rd, I am co-hosting and co-creating a really powerful Samhain ceremony with two fellow priestesses and witches. We will be taking a group of women into the depths of dark feminine territory, talking a little bit about the law, but really going into the embodied experience of reclaiming our dark feminine. So we're taking you to the places that you don't really want to go. We're escorting you into the underworld so that you can actually reclaim the parts of yourself you most want to know. Dark feminine is, as we will discuss in today's video, a territory within our being, within our consciousness, that the world deeply fears, and there's a lot of fear-based programming and conditioning around this consciousness. There's a reason for that, and this ceremony dedicated to this time of Samhain, when the veil is most thin, this is the season of the witch. This is the time when the dark feminine is ready and ripe to be reclaimed within all of us. So we are hosting this ceremony for a group of women online on Friday the 3rd of November. So if you're interested in joining us, it's only £22. It's going to include embodiment practices, light language activations, clearings, purging of old witch wounds. It's really deep diving stuff, considering we've only got 2 hours together, and you're going to be held by 3 incredibly powerful healers. So if you're interested in joining us, the details for that are in the description box below. Okay, let's dive into today's video now, which is really dedicated to outlining what dark feminine is and why it's time to reclaim this energy for the sake of the healing of this planet, as well as our own individualized experience. I'm going to start this with a little bit around the law, so Jewish law, especially around the story, the creation story of Adam, Eve and Lilith, to really allow you to understand archetypally what energies we're working with. I'm going to then explain my own personal experience of liberating Lilith within myself and meeting her for the first time. And we're going to then talk about why this is absolutely necessary as part of our awakening, remembrance and reclamation process. And it's often the part, especially as women, the part that we're most terrified to venture towards, to reclaim, to acknowledge exists within us, because there's so much icky, karmic conditioning. There's so much programming that says it's wrong, that it's dark, that it's demonic. We're going to unpack all of that today. So according to medieval Jewish law, Adam's first wife was not Eve. So we all know the creation story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? Well, turns out there was wife number 1, okay? And her name was Lilith. You may have heard the name Lilith before. You may have seen her painted as a very dark and demonic energy. So according to ancient law, she was considered Adam's first wife. She was made of the same dirt of the earth that Adam was made of. So they were created equal at the beginning of time. But problems arose because Adam wanted a subservient wife and Lilith was a wild woman. And so the story goes that Lilith refused to submit to Adam. She refused to be dominated. She refused to be submissive. She refused to be the pacifying counterpart that he was looking for. And I think one of the main branches of this story suggests that, she wanted to be on top during sex and he wanted to be on top, and there was a fight and contention over who was going to be on top. And because of Lilith's refusal to submit, there are 2 kind of primary variations of the story. One suggests that she sprouted wings and she flew out of the Garden of Eden, so she liberated herself. The other suggests that she was ejected from the Garden of Eden. But either way, she was not what Adam had in mind as a wife, and so her wild, ungodly ways were removed from this sacred space of the Garden of Eden. And she was then presented, you know, in Jewish mythology and, you know, subsequent archetypal kind of mythology as demonic. She was considered unholy, ungodly, wild, dark, in the sense that she was, not of God, basically. And so we have Lilith, this archetype of, you know, the woman that can't be tamed. And then we have Eve. Eve was wife number 2, and Eve was created to be specifically what Adam was looking for, which was a nice, passive, submissive, docile, meek and mild wife that would indeed submit to him, that would let him be on top. And as you can see from this kind of broader creation story, we have 2 strands of feminine consciousness that have now taken form and taken shape. We have the dark feminine, and even we have to be even kind of aware and conscious of what we mean by dark and what we deduce from the word dark. We have dark feminine. In this context, I'm talking about what we would call shadow or taboo, or aspects that have been disregarded, shamed, slandered, or denied by ourselves or in society. That's what I'm referring to as dark. So we've got this dark feminine archetype of Lilith, and then we've got the light feminine being the aspects of consciousness that are perhaps more acceptable in conscious awareness within ourselves and in society, as, you know, the submissive housewife, the one that is, you know, service to others. She thinks about others before herself. She's the good girl. Lilith is the bad girl. And so why am I starting with this this iteration of the creation story? Well, I think that those archetypes of Lilith and Eve, they help you to really start to perhaps explore within your own consciousness, because you have both within you, where perhaps you tend to lean towards. Do you tend to lean towards these wild ways where you naturally rebel against authority, where you really kind of claim your autonomy and your sovereignty? Or do you lean towards people pleasing and saying yes when you mean no, saying no when you mean yes? Tending to kind of lower your voice, tending to swallow the words that you want to speak, tending to do things for others, tending to tame the wildness within you. To me, Eve is the domesticated feminine. She is the feminine, the embodiment of feminine energy that has been contained and made palatable for the patriarchy. So she is the aspect of the feminine that has been made acceptable and normalized in society. And there's nothing wrong with heart-led energy, of course. There's nothing wrong with being someone that thinks of others and that does live from a service to others template, you know, especially as light workers. This is very common. But when this light feminine energy is not tempered with this, what we would call dark feminine energy, or this more unapologetic expression of the feminine consciousness, what happens is we become people pleasers. We lose connection to our power, our boundaries, our sense of worth and confidence. When we reclaim the Lilith within us, we are reclaiming the aspect of our consciousness that has been shamed, denied, ignored, shut down, persecuted for millennia. Reclaiming Lilith is reclaiming our magic. When we reclaim the Lilith, when we reclaim these darker elements, so this is the witch within us, this is the mystic, this is the wild woman, this is the woman that, you know, and this is not necessarily gender specific, we all carry these archetypes of light and dark within us, but it's reclaiming the aspect of us that is sovereign, that is anchored in our boundaries, worth, values, needs first, so that we can serve others from a place of overflow. What tends to happen with the Eve archetype is that we're serving and giving to others, and believe me, I've lived most of my life here, I know it well. We give, and actually we tend to be operating from a cup half empty or a fully fucking emptied cup, because we on some level feel it's wrong to claim the aspect of us that claims our power, that claims what we need, that asks for what we want unapologetically and stands for that and doesn't take less. So as you can see, it's really important that we temper whatever energy we're in more dominantly with the other. And what we're seeing on the planet right now is not only the resurrection of feminine energy, we're really seeing the resurrection of this Lilith, and Lilith is just one archetype of dark feminine. I'm not going to go into all the different archetypes right now. Of course, there are tens, if not hundreds of them, and that is an entirely different video, but I'm using Lilith as the example because she has been pinned within religious law as the demonic feminine. And this is an incredibly important conversation for us to be having right now, because when we reclaim that power, the Lilith power that's unapologetic, that knows its magic, that knows how fucking powerful it is, we become a force to be reckoned with. And that's the force the world needs right now. We have lived for so long under the rule of patriarchy, which has demonized the feminine, especially these dark feminine expressions and embodiments. We have lived under the rule of patriarchy, which has diminished within every single being the importance of intuition, the importance of connecting to the subtle realms, the importance of free expression of emotionality, of being in the body and being deeply sensual. The patriarchy has stamped this out of all of us, and we are now in the process of reclaiming it. And this is important because when we reclaim our feminine consciousness in its totality, we reclaim our portal back to magic, back to our embodied divinity. And so I want to share my personal experience of reclaiming Lilith, or at the very least meeting Lilith. So this happened for me 2 years ago, 2021, at the time of making this video. So some of you may be familiar, if you're on my channel already, that I had a very explosive Kundalini awakening in 2019. At the time of having my Lilith awakening, I had been then 2 years into a Kundalini awakening, and I was visiting a mentor, someone that I'd been working with for about 4 years on this soul journey, who owns a healing retreat centre here in the UK. And this was someone that I had, at least at the surface level, a very amicable and beautiful relationship with, but I always knew and sensed that there was an underlying fear in my relationship with her, because she's an older woman, that I couldn't be fully expressed in what I was experiencing or what I was going through, especially with the Kundalini awakening, because I really feared judgment from her. This woman does not follow any religious system, but karmically, her work is very heavily imbued with the essence of and the frequency of the church. It's very heavily imbued with patriarchal programming, even though she's not consciously aware of it. And once I started to vocalize this to other sisters that had visited her, they started to reflect and acknowledge the same. So I knew I wasn't going crazy. There was a real lack of feminine embodiment in this space. But I was getting, a lot of insight from going there, and I was still in quite a disempowered place when I was going to visit her. So this last time I visited her in 2021, I was experiencing lots of activations with the Kundalini. I was going through, as we do with this process, a lot of alchemy, a lot of transformation. And it was the first time meeting her at this last visit that I actually said to her, I've had a Kundalini awakening. I hadn't told her up until that point, and that I channel light language, and there's a lot being cleared in my system. And once I said those words out loud, the energy shifted so tangibly, and her response to me was so cold. She got up, got her partner, they both came and sat down. She asked me to re-explain what I just said, that I'd had a Kundalini awakening, that I was a channel, that I channeled light language. They discussed my revelations, and both concluded that I had been possessed by a demon and that I'd given my body and my humanity to a demonic possession, and that I was carrying darkness within me. I was staying there for 3 days, and she said, I really don't want to see you or be in your space until you've cleared this. You need to go away, go on the land. You need to call on the universe. You need to call in as much light as you can. This is dark. And she was like, in all honesty, like, if you haven't cleared this, you probably need to leave by the time, you know, we have another conversation. So for 3 days I stayed on site, and I didn't go back to her until the last day. I stayed in my room processing. I cannot even begin to put into words the experience I was having when I had someone so close to me, a mentor, someone I'd really put so much trust into, and so much that I'd forged a spiritual and emotional relationship with, someone that I respected and admired, and, you know, I put trust and faith in her. When she turned into this energy of, you are demonic, you have demonic possession, you've given yourself to the darkness, it catalyzed a process within me. The only way I can describe it is like my entire being started to knot and tangle, and I felt so incredibly ill and unsettled and unsure of myself, my path, that I was ready to quit all of my spirituality. By the time I left that space, I said to her, I don't know how to move forwards with this, because my experience is that this isn't demonic. And at that point she said, well, the best thing to do is to kind of leave. You need to clear it. It's probably best you don't come back until you have. And I remember when I left, I parked up on the side of the road, and actually I wanted to leave earlier, but I'd driven a friend to the retreat as well, and I was driving her home. Once I dropped her off and I was parked up on the side of the road, I was in pieces, because my biggest fear for my entire life, being raised Catholic and then going through a Kundalini awakening, was that I was unintentionally serving darkness. Darkness being the demonic, the aspects of consciousness that have been completely severed from source, severed from heart energy, that do not serve God, Goddess, that serve, you know, the negative factions. And that's been my biggest fear my whole life. I was scared of the dark as a kid, even as an adult. You know, I've had so many random crazy experiences on this journey that my biggest fear has always been, I don't want to serve the dark. And what this experience did was plunged me right into the heart of darkness, but not the darkness I was anticipating. So when we think of darkness, we do think of the demonic. We think of these like Luciferian, satanic, really, you know, like child sacrifice and all of these really, really dark aspects of the human expression. When I was plunged into this unraveling and ego death, and I was sat in my car crying my eyes out, thinking, oh my God, have I, in the purest intentions, I've gone onto my spiritual path, wanting to serve, wanting to be a conduit for God, Goddess, wanting to awaken, live my soul purpose, and questioning everything up until that point. And then my soul started to speak to me and said, Natasha, go deeper. Okay, go deeper than this looping turmoil you're in, because right now you're triggered. There was a really big karmic trigger. Go deeper. What lies beneath this fear? And it wasn't that I feared a demon outside of me. It wasn't that I feared being unknowingly sold into some kind of satanic Luciferian cult. It was actually that I feared the darkness within myself. What does that mean? It meant that I feared facing the parts of myself that had been in shadow or unconscious. And do you know who I met when I sat and I descended into my own underworld? I met Lilith. And it came to me as a woman. And if you Google Lilith, you'll see various depictions of her. But she was there in the darkness, and she was looking at me, and I felt her in me, as me, not knowing anything of Lilith, not knowing of, the lore about her, not knowing actually what her true expression is. I didn't really know initially what or who I was meeting. But when I sat with that energy in the underworld of my being, with this woman that had been relegated and cast out to the shadow, what I reconnected with was my power. What I reconnected with was my magic. What I reconnected with was my sexuality. And not just, you know, light femme sexuality of patriarchal porn star sexuality, like my raw, primal, erotic nature. I reconnected with it. And this is what has been cast out of mainstream society. This is what has been relegated to the shadows within all of us. This aspect that is wild, that is not domestic, that has not been domesticated or beaten down by the programming of the patriarchy, by the programming of the wounded masculine. This is an energy that is like no fucks given. I know who I am. I know my divinity. I know my worth. I know what I want. I claim what I want. And I do so without apology. And I express how I want. I dress how I want. And I do it for me. I do it to serve my own experience as God, Goddess embodied. So you can imagine it was quite an initiation into dark feminine. What felt like a real betrayal from a mentor of mine, descending into the underworld of my being, meeting Lilith, then doing the research into Lilith. And I was told when I was in the underworld that this is Lilith. And so I was there like, Lilith, who is this? What does this mean? You know, and then I was reading, she's the Jewish, you know, she's in Jewish law, she's the demonic goddess or blah, blah, blah. And I realized that this is the part of me that I both long to embody and recapture and reclaim, and I'm fucking terrified of. I'm also fucking terrified of this part. And that is usually the dance that we're in when we meet dark feminine. There is the aspect of us that is not satiated by just the light, because we're not just light. We are all of it. We are all of it. We are the light and the dark doesn't have to be inhumane. It doesn't have to be demonic. It doesn't have to be evil. The darkness is that which has been deemed unacceptable by societal standards and programming. So we are dancing often between this deep, deep hunger to reclaim the parts of us that have been lost, that are taboo, that are not normal, that are weird, that are wacky, that are like outright out there, you know? We are hungering to reclaim those multifaceted aspects of the soul self, and simultaneously we're terrified. We're terrified because we carry the soul and cellular memory of persecution. This is where witch wound comes up. Dark feminine, witch wound, they go hand in hand. The aspect of consciousness within all of us that is deeply intuitive, that is connected to the earth, that is connected, that is the bridge embodied between heaven and earth, between spirit and matter, that is connected to the plants, that is connected to the animal kingdom, that is deeply sentient, that feels fully, that expresses fully, that is connected to the power of sexual energy as life force energy, as the force of energy that drives creation itself. Think about all of the programming we've been exposed to in religions around sex, right? And sex being something that's shameful, sex being something that's wrong, sexual expression being something that can only be experienced within very limited and narrow parameters, okay? So we've been bombarded with religious and spiritual conditioning about the wrongness of reclaiming these parts, but they are absolutely innate to our multifacetedness. Now, as with all things, there's a light and there's a darkness, or there's a higher and a lower expression. When we come into contact with dark feminine energy, we are starting to reclaim our power, our sexual energy, our knowingness and faith in God, in our worth and deservability of being on this planet, being embodied. There are lower expressions of this, right? And what I mean by that is we can get power hungry. We can use our sexuality to seduce, to manipulate, to coerce. We can use these elements of really the lower 3 chakras in wounded ways, okay? So we have to be mindful that most of the psychopaths on the planet right now are operating from distorted lower chakra energy. So we do have to take accountability, not just say, well, I reclaim all of me, and that includes murdering people and this and that and the other. We acknowledge that there are aspects within these shadows that are not healthy to be expressed, that are not being driven by the soul. They're being driven by unconscious wounding that needs to dominate, that needs to have power over, that wants to control. But when we go into the shadow, we are facing all of this. We're facing the aspects that want to be reclaimed and embodied, and we're also facing the aspects that need to be alchemized, that need to be witnessed without judgment, and we also need to make the conscious choice not to enact them, right? So when we are in this territory, we are really bumping up against a lot of, as I've said, what we'd call witch wounding, which is the fear within especially women that's arising right now, that being ourselves is dangerous. Being fully embodied, being in these female magnetic bodies that are portals of creation, we are the goddess embodied, that being in these bodies, being anchored, centered in our wombs, our hearts, being channels of divinity, channels for creation, being fully expressed, that there is a wrongness to this, and that if we fully tap into this energy, something in our soul and cellular memory says it's not safe. I'm going to get, persecuted. I'm going to get shoved out of the tribe, the community. I'm going to be in isolation. There's even a fear of being killed, because that has happened in other incarnations for most of us on this path, especially those that have this awareness of the multifaceted nature. If you've been on a Kundalini awakening, or your soul has reached a point in its evolution where it's starting to remember at this level, your body will start to now bring up that fear-based conditioning around, I want to express, but it's not safe to express. It's carried in the nervous system, it's carried in our bodies, it's carried in our soul memory. Okay, so we have to remember that when we are reclaiming these dark feminine aspects, these aspects of consciousness that have been demeaned, diminished, disregarded, and deliberately destroyed, we are going to have to face and meet all of the ways in which we've been taught to fear these aspects, and also all the ways in which perhaps these aspects want to, that there may be a wonkiness, right, in how they want to express. So I'll give an example. Recently, I've realized that more of this Lilith embodiment is needed for me, that I tend to operate from heart up with a real disconnect on a day-to-day level to my power center of my solar plexus, to my sexual energy, because I still hold a lot of religious and spiritual programming, that connection to my sexuality and my sexual energy, which is really very commonplace in my body. And that's not to say that I want to have sex all the time. I just feel my sexuality, my aliveness, the fullness of my life force very viscerally in my body. I have an association, being raised Catholic, that that's wrong and that my pleasure is wrong. So I'm still in the process of really deconstructing and deconditioning a lot of very deep spiritual and religious programming, and also having had many lifetimes in incarnations as a monk, as a nun, in these very, in almost like austerity mindsets, where I've really, I've been either transcendental and wanting to be disembodied and wanting to leave the physical plane, or I've been in a lot of Puritan energy, in church lives, where I've believed and invested in a lot of very rigid dogma about what's right and wrong. And so I'm in the process of really, deeply cleansing my own being of this programming, so that I can reach what feels like an authentic space within my own embodiment, of being able to dance between the light and the dark, to being able to marry the two within my being. And I want to kind of add to this that if you've had a Kundalini awakening, you are going to meet this. You're going to meet this this initiation within your experience at some point, because the Kundalini is the goddess waking up within you. It is the feminine face of God waking up and animating herself within you. That means that your full expression, your magic, your soul gifts, your wisdom that doesn't fit into any box or religion or system, it's all going to come online. And as it does, you're going to have to meet all the programming and conditioning that says it's wrong, it's bad, it's evil, you know, it's demonic, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to be forced to really be able to find faith in amidst all of the fear-based conditioning. Can you trust that your deepest expression and that what you're deeply being called to do, what wants to move through you from an authentic place, from your heart, from the depths of your soul, that may, you know, inspire a lot of fear within you, that is your dharma, and that it's not wrong to live your dharma, and that you are a unique piece of this multidimensional cosmic puzzle, and that your unique dharma and expression is actually essential for the return to the singularity, to the oneness, to the remembrance for all of us. So the Kundalini awakening really is a technology that speeds up this process of purging all of the old conditioning, programming, fear, trauma. And you will become an embodiment of that which you fear. You will start to naturally embody an energy that you have been taught is wrong, bad, or demonic in some way. Okay? So being more psychic now, being in touch with my light language, being a channel, being deeply embodied and really learning to love my full spectrum expression, my anger and my rage, you know, seeing how connected to my power that is and how necessary it is for me to take action, to set boundaries, being connected to my deep grief, being connected to the many facets of my expression. This is the Kundalini. It's the fullness of you becoming conscious within your experience. It's the fullness of you waking up to itself. It's going to challenge you. It's going to really it's not going to push you out of your comfort zone. It's going to fucking burn the comfort zone to the ground over and over and over again. So you are no longer bound by dogma, by conditioning, by anything that is not of the divine. And how the divine wishes to express through you, how God, Goddess wants to express through you, that's between you and God, right? I cannot tell you what is right and wrong. This is where discernment comes in. This is where energetic cleansing and a real sense of integrity must come in, so that we can really discern, are we acting and living from an authentic space? Are we moving from the highest integrity? Are we honoring what's being asked of us? So, yeah. This is a big topic, and it's something I'm very, very passionate about, especially as, you know, my path is, as this channel suggests, that of embodied spirituality. I am here to bridge, in my own experience and in my teachings and in my my community space, bridge matter and spirit, heaven and earth. We are here to be, I believe, fully embodied in our humanity with conscious awareness. It's the feminine path to choose the path of embodiment. It's the feminine path to choose to descend your conscious awareness that I am into this human experience and to feel it fully. To be in this duality with awareness. It's not going to be for everyone. But if you're on my channel and you're watching this video and you're on a similar path yourself, or you're experiencing similar things, the chances are you're also here to walk this path of becoming a conscious and embodied vehicle and vessel of the divine. What an honor. What an honor to have the fullness of who you are being birthed in this incarnation. What an honor it is to burn down the cage of conditioning, that has kept us imprisoned for so many lifetimes, for eons, in this realm of reality. This is the time when we break free. And it really is very potent now at the time of filming, because we've got this eclipse portal, we're in Scorpio season, this is, you know, this is witch season. And we're also at a really critical juncture in the collective evolutionary process where wounded masculine, wonky, fear-based programming and conditioning is running rampant, right? And we're seeing more and more division and distortion on the planet, deviant ways in which the shadow, which has not been witnessed, is running wild. What's needed now is the reclamation of our divinity, of our darkness in its healthiest expression. So we can no longer be the doormats that stand for these atrocities, so that we no longer stay silent when we want to speak, when we no longer place fear above love, when we choose to honor divinity and God and the sanctity of life above all else. When we embody and embrace our darkness and dark feminine energy, we become warriors of God. We become, you know, Isis. We become Kali. We become the very thing the patriarchy has feared. And that's how we burn it to the ground. It's a grassroots thing. It's every single one of us on the ground reclaiming our healthy power, reclaiming our knowing of our divinity, reclaiming the fullness of our sexual energy and expression, because that energy drives creation, is the most powerful form of alchemy, or force of alchemy possible when it's harnessed with awareness. It's time to reclaim the magic that they've demonized. How exciting. So thank you so much for joining me today. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you're interested in diving deeper with me in this realm in a more embodied way, so getting into the body, actually experiencing what it's like to descend into this territory, feeling those frequencies in your being, seeing and feeling the places of resistance within you, join us up for this Samhain ceremony on November 3rd. The description box has all the information you'll need. If you've got any questions or comments, be responsible with what you're posting, be authentic, of course, but please be mindful that this is a contentious subject. And I won't stand for or tolerate any bullshit. Basically, if I see mouthpieces of the very thing that I am standing against and rising against now, like, you'll just be removed. So let's keep it respectful. Let's keep it, you know, amicable. Discussion and debate is welcome, but let's keep it respectful, yeah? So sending lots of love. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the next one.